We are an independent, spirit-filled church serving the North Fort Worth area. We are Mercy Life Church.
Okay, hi. Okay. Yay. Okay. Hi. I'm William Henley. I'm the executive pastor here. And today is Purim. Started at sunset last night and goes through sunset tonight. It's very interesting that we actually have Purim at the same time as Palm Sunday because, first of all, Passover isn't until next month. If you remember, Jesus was crucified on Passover. Right before Passover. Yeah, he took the Passover meal with his disciples. So the question is, why is Easter and Passover not at the same time this month or this year? And the reason is because Passover is based on the Jewish lunar calendar. However, Easter is based on the Julian lunar calendar, because that is when the early Christian church set it up in the Roman Empire. So, today we're going to be reading out of the book of Esther. We're pretty much reading like the entire book. And I do want to let you know there is a difference in the book of Esther if you're reading it in the Greek Bible versus any other Bible. And the reason is during the Second Temple period, so around 300 BC, more or less, maybe a bit earlier, but there was this ruler down in the Greek area who decided that he loved the Jewish writings and thought that there was just enormous value in them and wanted to preserve them. So he asked for several rabbis to come down and I believe there's something like 80 rabbis and to translate the Hebrew scriptures into Greek. And so now there was an issue when they got down to the book of Esther because they felt like the Greek reader might not understand what is going on. So the Greek edition has a few additions, or you could say footnotes, also changes a couple of names, like this isn't unusual. Like the names we have in the New Testament are not these people's real names. They're anglicized versions of the names. And so, this is the same way today. Like my name's William, in French it's Guillaume, in Spanish it's Guillermo, German Wilhelm. So, it's kind of like that. So like in the Hebrew, we have the king named Xerxes. In the Greek, his name is Ahasuerus. The names it's the same thing. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about Mordecai's dream. And this is in addition A to the Greek text. So in the second year of the reign of Ahasuerus the Great, on the first day of Nisan, Mordecai, son of Jair, son of Shimon, son of Kish, of the tribe of Benjamin, had a dream. So, here we go. He was a Jew living in the city of Susa, a great man serving in the court of the king. He was one of the captives whom King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon had brought from Jerusalem with King Joachim of Judah. And this was his dream. So this was shortly after they went into captivity. Okay. So this was his dream. Noise and confusion, thunder and earthquake, tumult on the earth. Then two great dragons came forward, both ready to fight. and they roared terribly. At the roaring, every nation prepared for war to fight against the righteous nation. It was a day of darkness and gloom, of tribulation and distress, affliction and great tumult on the earth. And the whole righteous nation was troubled. They feared the evils that threatened them and were ready to perish. Then they cried out to God, and at their outcry, as though from a tiny spring, there came a great river with abundant water. Light came, and the sun rose, and the lowly were exalted and devoured those who held honor. Mordecai saw in his dream and determined what God had to do. So, is this going to switch over? Come on, switch over. Trying to switch back to camera 2. There we go. Okay. Okay, that's actually kind of cool. Okay, so Mordecai saw this in his dream, what God had determined to do, and after he awoke, he had it in his mind, seeking all day to understand it in every detail. Now, Mordecai took his rest in the courtyard with Bigthan and Teresh, the 2 eunuchs of the king who kept watch in the courtyard. He overheard their conversation and inquired to their purposes, and learned that they were preparing to lay hands on King Xerxes, and he informed the king concerning them. Then the king examined the 2 eunuchs, and after that they confessed it, and they were led away in execution. So the king made a permanent record of these things, and Mordecai wrote an account of them. And the king ordered Mordecai to serve in the court and rewarded him for these things. So, but Haman, which every time you hear Haman in traditional Jewish, you're allowed to hiss or make a sound because the name is a curse in Hebrew. But Haman, son of Hammedatha the Agite, who was held in great honor by the king, determined to injure Mordecai and his people because of the 2 eunuchs of the king. So, who is Xerxes? So, as I mentioned, this happened during the time of the exile. Mordecai was one of the people who was carried away from Jerusalem into exile. So, King Xerxes ruled over 127 territories in his kingdom. They reached all the way from India to the land of Cush, which is now called Ethiopia. Here is what happened during the time of Xerxes ruled over the whole Persian kingdom. He was ruling from his throne in the fort of Susa. So you can see Susa is right there in the middle of the kingdom. This is a huge area, people. I mean, this is, you see some of Turkey up there. You see Egypt. You see Ethiopia. Of course, Jerusalem, Lebanon, Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, Iraq, Iran. I mean, it's just absolutely insane. I believe some of those down here, these are the Caucasus to the south of Russia. So, I mean, we just have this huge area. Okay, so, actually, I can actually draw on the screen here. So, let's see. We got, up here is literally the south of Russia. Right here is Saudi Arabia. We have Iran, Iraq. I mean, so yeah, we just have this huge area. Okay. So, in the 3rd year of his rule, King Xerxes gave a feast. It was for all of his nobles and officials. And sorry if this isn't period accurate. This is the best I could do with AI. So, It was a feast for all of his nobles and officials. The military leaders of Persia and Media were there. So were the princes and the nobles of the territories he ruled over. Every day for 180 days, he showed his guests the great wealth of his kingdom. He also showed them how glorious his kingdom was. When those days were over, the king gave another feast, and it lasted for 7 days. So basically, for 180 days, they went around their kingdom, and every day he showed the guests the great wealth of his kingdom. Okay, so you know what? Maybe he didn't travel. It sounds like people were actually coming in, bringing stuff in from across the kingdom. Okay, so then after that, for 7 days, he held another feast that lasted for 7 days. And it was held in the garden of the king's courtyard. And it was for all the people who lived inside of Susa. Everyone from the least important person to the most important person was invited. So the 180 days was for nobles, then the 7 days was for everyone. Queen Vashti also gave a feast. Only women were invited. It was held in the royal palaces of King Xerxes. On the 7th day, Xerxes was in a very good mood because he had drunk a lot of wine. So he gave a command to the 7 officials who served him. Okay, so King Xerxes told them to bring Queen Vashti to him. He wanted her to come wearing her royal crown. He wanted to show off her beauty to the people and the nobles. She was so lovely to look at. The attendants told Queen Vashti what the king had ordered her to do, but she refused to come. So the king was very angry. So it was the king's practice to ask for advice about matters of law and felonies. So he spoke with the wise men, and the king said, "You know the law. What should I do to Queen Vashti? She hasn't obeyed my command." The officials told her what I had ordered her to do, didn't they? So then Memucan gave a reply to the king and the nobles. He said, "Queen Vashti has done what is wrong. But she didn't do it only against you, King Xerxes. She did it against all the nobles. She did it against all the people and all the territory you rule over. All the women will hear about what the queen has done. Then they won't respect their husbands. They say King Xerxes commanded Queen Vashti to be brought to him, but she wouldn't come." So here is what will start today. The leading women in Persia and Media who have heard about the queen's actions will act in the same way. They will disobey all your nobles just as she disobeyed you. They won't have any respect for their husbands. They won't honor them. So, if it pleases you, send out a royal order. Let it be written down in the laws of Persia and Media. Those laws can never be changed. Remember this, not even the king can change the law. Once something's put into law, not even the king can change it. This is very important later on. Okay. Let the royal order say that Vashti can never see you again, and let her position as queen be given to someone who is better than she. And let your order be announced through all of your entire kingdom. So they did this, and I am missing a graphic, it looks like. It's okay. It is okay. Oh, I know what the graphic is for. The graphic is for something later. Okay, so later, so now we're in Esther chapter 2. So later, the great anger of King Xerxes calmed down. Then he remembered Vashti and what she had done. He also remembered the royal order he had sent out concerning her. At that time, the king's personal attendants made a suggestion. They said, "King Xerxes, let a search be made for some young virgins for you. Appoint some officials in every territory in your kingdom. Have them bring all these beautiful young women into the fort. Put them in the special place where the virgins stay, and then put Haggai in charge of them. And he's going to be in charge of the women, and he'll be in charge of the beauty care to the new group of women. Then let the young woman who pleases you the most become queen in Vashti's place. And you know what? The king liked that advice, so he followed it. So now, in this reason was Mordecai, which we've already talked about with the Mordecai's dream. Okay, so let's see, skip down some. Mordecai had a cousin named Hadash. He had raised her because she didn't have a father or a mother. Hadash was also called Esther. She had a lovely figure and was very beautiful. Mordecai had adopted her as his own daughter. He had done it when his father and mother died. And yes, I know I was being silly here with the AI. I purposely have her taking a selfie because, she's 12 and is like very beautiful. So, after the king's orders were announced, many young women were brought to the fort of Susha. Haggai put in charge of them. Esther was also taken to the king's palace. She was put under the control of Haggai. He was in charge of the place where the virgin stayed. Esther pleased him. He showed her how happy he was with her. Right away, he provided her with beauty care and special food. He appointed 7 female attendants to help her. They were chosen from the king's palace. He moved her and her attendants into the best part of the palace. But Esther hadn't told anyone who her people were. She hadn't talked about her family. That's because Mordecai had told her not to. Mordecai tried to find out how Esther was getting along. He wanted to know what was happening. So he walked back and forth near the courtyard by the palace where the virgins were staying. He did that every day. So now every woman had to complete 12 months of beauty care. Okay. And a virgin's turn to go into King Xerxes could come only after a full 12 months had passed. And here is how she would go to the king. She would be given anything she wanted from the palace where the virgin stayed. She could take it with her to the king's palace. In the evening, she would go in there. And in the morning, she would leave. Then she would go to the special place where the king's concubines stayed. She would be put under the control of Sheshbazzar. He was the king's official. She would never return to the king unless he was pleased with her. He had to send for her by name before she could go to him again. This is very, very, very important. The king liked Esther more than any other woman. She pleased him more than any other virgins. So he put a royal crown on her head. He made her queen in Vashti's place. Then the king gave a feast to honor Esther. All his nobles and officials were invited. He announced a holiday all through the territories he ruled over. He freely gave many gifts in... Okay, so now this here is what we've already read about. So we're going to jump over to chapter 3. And let's see, does this work? Okay, can you turn the key on? Great. Okay, so after these events, King Xerxes honored Haman. Haman was the son of Hammedatha. He was from the family line of Agag. The king gave Haman a higher position than he had anyone before. He gave him a seat of honor. It was higher than any position that any of the other nobles had. All the royal officials at the palace gate got down on their knees. They gave honor to Haman. That's because the king had commanded them to do it. But Mordecai refused to get down on his knees. He wouldn't give Haman any honor at all. The royal officials at the palace gate asked Mordecai a question. They said, "Why don't you obey the king's commands?" Day after day they spoke to him, but he still refused to obey. So they told Haman about it. They wanted to see whether he would let Mordecai get away with what he was doing. Mordecai had told them that he was a Jew. So Haman noticed that Mordecai wouldn't get down on his knees. He wouldn't give Haman honor. So Haman burned with anger. But when he found out when Mordecai's people were, he decided not to kill just Mordecai. He also looked for a way to destroy all of Mordecai's people, the Jews. This was to be one of the early genocides. He wanted to kill all of them everywhere in the kingdom of Xerxes. Then Haman said to King Xerxes, "Certain people are scattered among the nations. They live in all the territories of your kingdom. They keep themselves separate from everyone else." Okay. Certain people, they live in territories in your kingdom. Their practices are different from the practice of all other people. They don't obey your laws. It really isn't good for you to put up with them. If it pleases you to give an order to destroy them, I'll even add 375 tons of silver to your royal treasure. You can use it to pay the men who take care of the matter. So the king took off his ring and off his finger. The ring had his royal seal on it. He gave the ring to Haman. Keep the money, the king said to Haman. Do what you want to do with these people. Dang it, I thought I fixed that. Okay. Okay, it's okay. If you guys are on a phone, you might have trouble reading this, but if you're on a TV or something, it should be fine. The king sent for his royal secretaries. It was the 13th day of the first month. The secretaries wrote down all of Haman's orders. They wrote them down in the writing of each territory in the kingdom. They also wrote them down in each language of the nation. The orders were sent to the royal officials. They also were sent to the governors of the territories, and they went out. So basically, this order went out all over the place, and they were all stamped with the king's own seal. Okay. They were carried by the messengers, and they were sent out all across the kingdom. The orders commanded people to destroy, kill, and wipe out the Jews. That included the young people and the old people alike. It included women and children. All the Jews were supposed to be killed on a single day. That day was the 13th day of the 12th month. It was the month of Adar. The orders also commanded people to take the goods that belonged to the Jews. A copy of the order had to be sent out as law. It had to be sent out to every territory in the kingdom, and it had to be announced to the people of every nation. Then they would be ready for that day. So this was a royal decree here. The king commanded the messengers to go out, so they did. The order was sent out from the safest place in Susa, and the king and Haman sat down and drank wine. But the people in the city were bewildered. Mordecai found out about everything that had been done. So he tore his clothes. And then he went out and cried. I'm not going to read all of this. Let's see. That's why. Really? What? Just, okay. Okay, there we go. Okay, so he cried bitter tears. Okay, but he only went as far as the palace gates. That's because no one who was dressed in black clothes was allowed to go through it. And the Jews were very sad. They didn't eat anything. They sobbed and they cried. And many of them put on black clothes. They were laying down in the ashes. They did all these things in every territory where the king's order and law had been sent out. Esther's eunuchs and female attendants came to her. They told her about Mordecai, and she became very troubled. She wanted him to take his black clothes off, so she sent him other clothes to wear, but he wouldn't accept them. Then Esther sent for Hathach. He was one of the king's eunuchs. He had been appointed to take care of her. She ordered him to find out what was troubling Mordecai. And so he went to Mordecai, and Mordecai told him everything that had been going on. And so Mordecai also gave Hashus a copy of the order. So Mordecai told Hashus to show the order to Esther. Man, they're explaining everything in detail. He wanted her to go and talk to the king and wanted her to beg for mercy. He wanted her to make an appeal before the king. So Hathach went back. He reported to Esther what Mordecai had said. Then Esther directed him to give an answer to Mordecai. She told him to say, "There is a certain law that everyone knows about. All of the king's officials know about it. The people in the royal territories know about it. It applies to any man or woman who approaches the king in the inner courtyard without being sent for. It says they must be put to death. But there is a way out. Suppose the king reaches out his goad rod toward them. Then their lives will be spared. But 30 days have gone by since the king has sent for me." And Esther's words were reported back to Mordecai. So realize this. If Esther approaches the king without being sent for, she could be put to death. Then he sent an answer back. He said, "You live in the king's palace, but don't think that just because you are there that you will be the only Jew who escape. What if you don't say anything at this time? Then help for the Jews will come from another place, but you and your family will die. Who knows? It's possible that you became a queen for a time just like this." Then Esther sent a reply to Mordecai. Okay, so, so basically she tells Mordecai to tell the Jews to go and fast for her. And we will fast as well, and then I will go to the king. I'll do it even though it's against the law. And if I have to die, I'll die. So Esther's literally putting her life on the line here. So Mordecai went away. He carried out all of Esther's directions. Okay, so chapter 5. Okay, on the third day, Esther put her royal robes on. She stood in the inner courtyard of the palace. It was in front of the king's hall. The king was sitting on his royal throne in the hall. He was facing the entrance. He saw Queen Esther standing in the courtyard. He was pleased with her. So he reached toward her the golden rod that was in his hand. Then Esther approached him, and she touched the tip of the rod. Remember, because he let out his golden rod, it means that he spared Esther's life. The king asked, "What is it, Queen Esther? What do you want? I'll give it to you. I'll even give you up to half of my kingdom." This shows you just how much he loved Esther. Esther replied, "King Xerxes, if it pleases you, come to a big dinner today I have prepared for you. And please have Haman come with you." "Bring Haman at once," the king said. "Then we'll do what Esther asked." So the king and Haman went out to the big dinner Esther had prepared. As they were drinking wine, the king asked Esther the same question again. "What do you want?" And Esther replied, "Here is what I want. Here is my appeal to you. I hope you will show me your favor. I hope you will be pleased to give me what I want. And I hope you will be pleased to listen to me. If you are, I'd like you and Haman to come tomorrow to the big dinner I'll prepare for you." So she's going to throw another feast. "Then I'll answer your question." That day, Haman was very happy. So he left the palace in a very good mood. But then he saw Mordecai at the palace gate, and he noticed that Mordecai didn't stand up when he walked by. In fact, Mordecai didn't have any respect for him at all, so he burned with anger against him. But Haman was able to control himself, and he went home. Haman called his friends and his wife together. He bragged to them about how rich he was. He talked about how many sons he had. He spoke about all the way the king had honored him. He bragged about how the king had given him a higher position than any of the other nobles and officials in his land. We know anyone who likes to brag about how rich they are? And that's not all, Haman added. I'm the only person Queen Esther invited to come with the king to the big dinner she gave. Now she has invited me along with the king tomorrow. But even all of that doesn't satisfy me. I won't be satisfied as I see that Jew Mordecai sitting at the palace gate. So Haman's wife, Zessa, and all of his friends spoke, and they said, get a pole in the morning, ask the king to have Mordecai put to death, have the pole struck through their body, set it up at a place where it'll be 75 feet above the ground. Everyone will be able to see it. Then go to the dinner with the king and have a good time. So Haman was delighted with the suggestion, and he got the pole ready. That night, the king couldn't sleep, so he ordered the officials of his rule to be brought in. He ordered someone to read them to him. It was written that Mordecai had uncovered the plans of Bigthana and Teresh against the king. They had been two of the king's officers who guarded the door, and they were the ones who were deciding to kill Xerxes. What great honor has Mordecai received for doing that? The king asked. Nothing has been done for him, the attendants answered. So the king asked, who is in the courtyard? Haman had just entered the outer courtyard of the palace. He had come to speak to the king about putting Mordecai to death. He wanted to talk about putting Mordecai's body up on the pole he had gotten ready for him. Now this is funny. The king's attendant said to him, Haman is standing in the courtyard. Bring him in, the king ordered. So Haman entered. Then the king asked him, what should be done for the man I want to honor? And Haman said to himself, is there anyone the king would rather honor than me? So he answered the king. He said, here is what you should do for the man you want to honor. Have your servants get a royal robe you have worn. Have them bring a horse you have ridden on. Have a royal crest placed on its head. Then give the robe and the horse to the one of your most noble princes, and let the robe be put on the man you want to honor, and let him be led on the horse through the city streets. Let people announce in front of him, this is what is done for the man the king wants to honor. Go right away, the king commanded Haman. Get the robe, bring the horses, and do exactly what you have suggested, and do it for the Jew Mordecai. Remember, Haman was wanting to kill Mordecai. He's sitting out there at the palace gate. Make sure you do everything you have suggested. So Haman got the robe and the horse and put them on Mordecai. Can you imagine what Mordecai's anger must have been at this time? After that, Mordecai returned to the palace gate. But Haman rushed home and covered his head because he was very sad. And he told his wives, Zeresh, everything that had happened. So, his advisors and wives spake to him. Your fall from power started with Mordecai. He's a Jew. So now you can't stand up against him. You are going to be destroyed. They were still talking with him when the king's officials arrived. They hurried Haman away to the big dinner Esther had prepared. So the king and Haman went to dine with Queen Esther. They were drinking wine on the second day, and the king asked, what do you want, Queen Esther? Then Queen Esther answered, King Xerxes, I hope you will show me your favor. I hope you will be pleased to let me live. This is what I want. Please spare my people. That's my appeal to you. My people and I have been sowed to be destroyed. We have been sowed to be killed and to be wiped out. Suppose we had only been sold as male and female slaves, then I wouldn't have said anything. The kind suffering wouldn't be a good reason to bother you. King Xerxes asked Queen Esther, Who is the man who has dared to do such a thing? And where is he? And Esther said, that man hates us. He's our enemy. He's this evil Haman. Then Haman was terrified in front of the king and the queen. The king got up. He was burning with anger. He left his wine and went out into the palace garden. But Haman realized that the king had already decided what he was going to do. So he stayed behind to beg Queen Esther for his life. The king returned from the palace garden to the dinner hall. Just then he saw Haman falling on the couch where Esther was lying. The king shouted, "Will he even rape the queen? Is he going to rape her while she's right here with me in this palace?" As soon as the king finished speaking, his men covered Haman's face. Then Harbona said, "There's a pole standing near Haman's house. He has gotten it ready for Mordecai. Mordecai is the one who spoke up to help you. Haman had planned to have him put to death. He was going to have the pole struck through his body." So the king said to his men, "Put Haman to death and stick the pole through his body. Set it up where everyone can see it." So they did. And they used the pole Haman had gotten ready for Mordecai. And then the king's anger had calmed down. But we still have a problem. Remember, what the king has signed into law cannot be undone even by the king. So at this time, Esther had told the king that Mordecai was her cousin, so Mordecai came to see the king. The king took off his ring, and it had the royal seal on it. He had taken it back from Haman. Now he gave it to Mordecai. And Esther put Mordecai in charge of everything Haman had owned. Esther made another appeal to the king. She fell at his feet and sobbed. She begged him to put an end to the evil plan of Haman. The king reached out his golden rod toward Esther. She got up and stood in front of him. "King Xerxes, I hope you will show me your favor. I hope you will think that what I am asking is the right thing to do. If you are pleased with me, and if it pleases you, let an order be written. Let it take the place of the message that Haman wrote." Let's see. King Xerxes gave a reply, and he said, "Haman attacked the Jews, so I have given Esther everything he owned. My men have struck a pole through his dead body, and they set it up where everyone can be seen. Now write another order in my name, and do it in the benefits of the Jews. Do what seems best to you. Stamp the order with my royal seal. Nothing that is written in my name and stamped with my seal can ever be changed." Okay, so what's he going to do that's going to be able to undo the previous order that he gave? Right away, the king sent for the royal secretaries, and it was the 23rd day of the month. This was on the day of the 7th. They wrote down all of Mordecai's orders to the Jews, and they gave it to the royal officials in the 127 territories. Okay, and it was written... Okay, they were written in the language of each nation, and they were also written to the Jews in their own writing and language. Mordecai wrote the orders in the name of King Xerxes, and he stamped them with the king's seal, and he sent them by messengers. They rode fast horses that were raised just for the kings. The Jews in every city could now gather together and fight for their lives. The king's order gave them that right. But what if soldiers from any nation or territory attacked them? What if they attacked their women and children? Then the Jews could be destroyed, kill, and wipe out. Then the Jews could destroy, kill, and wipe out those soldiers. They could also take the goods that belonged to the enemies. So they were to destroy so the previous order said that the Jews were to be killed, but the new order said that the Jews were allowed to fight back, and if anyone killed any of the Jews, then the Jews had the right to kill them. So you realize what's happening here. They could also take the goods that belonged to the enemies. So a day was appointed to do what this was done, and it was the 13th day of the 12th month, and that is Purim. A copy of the order was sent out to every law. Okay, let's see. They raced along. Mordecai left, went on his way. Let's see. The Jews were filled with joy and happiness. They were very glad because now they were being honored. They celebrated and had a huge, huge feast. And I'm going to skip through a lot of this because it's repeating the same things over and over again. Okay, so one can stand up to him. All of the nobles in the territories helped the Jews. So did the royal officials, the governors, and the king's officers. That's because they were so afraid of Mordecai. Remember, he was second in command now. He was well known in the palace, and his fame spread throughout all the territories. So the Jews struck down all of their enemies with swords. They killed them and destroyed them, and they did what they pleased to those who hated them. The Jews killed in total 500 men, and they destroyed them in the safest place. They also killed in all of these other areas. Let's see. Okay, there were 10 sons of Haman, and so, let's see. Sorry, there's a lot of, okay. The Jews had killed 500 men. They destroyed them in the safe place, and they also killed the sons of Haman there. What have they done in the rest of my territories? Now, what do you want? I'll give it to you. What do you want from me? I'll do that too. If it pleases, Esther said, let the Jews in Susha carry out today's order tomorrow also. Stick posts through the dead bodies of Haman's 10 sons and set them up where everyone can see them. So the king ordered that as well. Jews, okay, and so they put a further 300 men to death in Susa alone. But this time they didn't take anything that belonged to those men. During that time, the rest of the Jews also gathered, and they lived in the king's territories. And so in total, look down here at the bottom, they killed 75,000 of their enemies. The Jews killed 75,000. And this is when it happened. They made it a day to celebrate with great joy, and they enjoyed good food. This is why the Feast of Purim is celebrated to this day. But the Jews in Susha had gathered together. Okay, let's see. Oh yeah, okay, so it was a long feast. Okay, let's keep going. Mordecai wrote down these events. So I guess Mordecai may have been the one who wrote the book of Esther. Mordecai told the Jews to celebrate the time when they got the rest of their enemies. Okay, let's see. So the Jews agreed to continue the celebrating they had started. Okay. The days the Jews were celebrating were called Purim. Purim comes from the word pure. Pur means lot. Now the Jews celebrate those 2 days every year. This is Esther 9:26. They do it because of everything that was written in Mordecai's letter. They also do it because what they had seen and what had happened to them. So they established it as a regular practice. They decided that they would always observe the 2 days of the year. They would celebrate it in the required way, and they would celebrate it at the appointed time. So, let's see. Okay, so then they sent out letters establishing when Purim was to take place. And let's see. And that's it. That is the story of Purim.
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
How long do you think you were up there?
An hour.
Exactly an hour.
I told you it's going to be the longest homily ever. Okay, Yeah, there's no way really to do Purim short. I guess I could have, but
Next time it's a long homily. Let's bring it up in 2 weeks.
so Father, just want to thank you right now for protecting the Jews, because through them has come Messiah, who has blessed the nations. Lord, we just ask today that you bless Israel. You bless the descendants of Jacob, Lord. You just always just watch over them, help them in their wars, Lord. Just bless them, Lord. It's in your son's name we pray. Amen.